Elderly black farmer fed 20 stranded bikers. Next morning, 200 Hell's Angels rebuilt his entire house. An old farmer gives his last bowl of chili to stranded veterans. The next morning, 200 bikers return, not for food, but to repay his kindness. As they rebuild his broken home, a lonely man finds family again, and wounded soldiers rediscover hope, dignity, and the healing power of compassion. Before we dive in, let us know in the comments, what time is it and where are you watching from? Let's start. I just gave you boys a bowl of chili. Elias's voice shook. His frail hands gripped the splintered wood of his rotting porch. The deafening roar of 200 motorcycles had just cut off, leaving a shocking, heavy silence in the crisp morning air. He looked down at Paticus, the 55-year-old giant in the leather veteran's rider jacket. Just beans and broth. Why are you all back here? Why are there flatbed trucks of lumber in my yard? Paticus stepped up to the bottom step. He didn't tower over the old man. Instead, he deliberately took off his black helmet and dropped to one knee in the dirt, forcing himself to look up into the 70-year-old farmer's tear-filled eyes. "Because you're lying to yourself, Elias," Paticus said, his gravelly voice thick with an emotion he usually kept buried. "It wasn't just beans. You know what it was." "It was all I had left," Elias whispered, a solitary tear escaping and getting lost in his silver beard. "But it wasn't worth this, not an army, not a brand-new house." "Let me tell you exactly what you handed me in that white bowl yesterday morning," Paticus said, his breathing shaky. "Yesterday, 20 of us were stranded out on your road. We took a bad detour trying to skirt the collapsed bridge on the highway. We hit jagged rock in the dark, blew our tires, snapped our drive belts. We spent the entire night freezing in the ditch. I watched men who survived combat, men who have been through absolute hell overseas, sitting in the freezing mud, shivering, feeling completely abandoned by the world. We felt like garbage, Elias. We felt discarded." Paticus reached out, gently placing his large scarred hand over Elias's trembling fingers on the wooden rail. "Then the sun comes up," Paticus continued, his voice cracking violently, "and we see this house. No offense, old man, but this place looked as broken as we felt. The roof caving in, the wood rotting. We thought whoever lived here would come out screaming with a shotgun. We expected anger. We expected fear. That's what the world usually gives guys who look like us. Fear, judgment, and closed doors." "I don't judge," Elias said softly, looking down at the biker. "Never saw the point in it." "I know." Paticus smiled, a sad, broken expression. The door opened. "You walked out in those denim overalls. You didn't yell. You didn't threaten us. You walked straight up to 20 intimidating bikers, and you held out your own survival. I looked at this house, Elias. I looked at your clothes. Logic told me that bowl of food was the very last thing in your pantry. Am I right?" Elias looked away, unable to meet the biker's intense gaze. He nodded slowly, shame coloring his voice. "My pension check was still 3 days out. It was the last of the dry beans, the last of the stock. I was going to stretch it." "And you gave it to us," Paticus choked out, the tears finally falling freely down his weathered cheeks. He didn't bother to wipe them away. "You handed 20 strangers your last meal. You were willing to starve for 3 days so we wouldn't have to be cold for one more morning. Do you understand what that did to us? It broke us, Elias. It shattered every cynical, bitter wall we'd built around our hearts. I just couldn't watch you suffer," Elias cried, his voice breaking into a devastating sob. "My Sarah, before my wife passed, she always said a house ain't a home unless it's feeding somebody. She died 5 years ago. This house has been dying right along with her. I was sitting in my kitchen yesterday listening to your engines fail. I looked at that last pot of food. I thought, what good is it keeping me alive if I'm just sitting here waiting to die anyway? Serving you boys, it was the first time my heart beat in 5 years. I held that food out to you because I needed to feel human again. Patercris stood up rapidly and pulled the frail, crying old man into a fierce, bone-crushing embrace. You saved us, Elias, not just from the cold. You saved our faith in humanity. So you sit down, you rest, because these 200 men behind me, they heard what you did, and they are going to tear down this rot and build you a fortress. The emotional toll of the rebuild peaked late that night. The skeletal frame of Elias's new house was already rising into the dark sky. The old shack was completely gone. 200 bikers were camped in the fields, but around a small crackling fire pit, it was just Elias, Patercris, and a few of the original 20 riders. "Why are you boys really doing this?" Elias asked, staring into the flames, pulling his plaid flannel tighter around his shoulders. "Tell me the real truth. I'm old. I'm not stupid. Nobody builds a 2-story house for a bowl of chili." Patercris stared into the fire for a long time. "The truth? The truth is, we're a family of broken parts, Elias. Most of us came back from wars with pieces missing. If not physically, then up here." He tapped his temple. "Society calls us heroes on Veterans Day and crosses the street to avoid us the other 364 days of the year. We ride motorcycles because the noise of the engine drowns out the quiet, dark thoughts in our heads. We stick together in this club because nobody else wants us around." Patercris looked up, his eyes reflecting the orange firelight. "When you walked out yesterday, you didn't see the gang patches. You didn't see the heavy leather or the tattoos or the combat scars. You just saw men. You treated us like we mattered. Do you have any idea how long it's been since some of these guys felt like they mattered to somebody outside this motorcycle club?" "Too long," Elias murmured, his heart physically aching for the tough, wounded men surrounding him. "You gave us our dignity back," Patercris said softly. "You can't buy that." So we rode back to the clubhouse. We called the Hells Angels. We called every chapter in the state. We told them, there's a man out on Route 9 who still believes in us. He gave us his last meal when he had nothing. The response was immediate. Men dropped their jobs, kissed their wives goodbye, and loaded up the lumber trucks. We're building this house because we need this house to exist. We need a physical monument in this world that proves pure, selfless kindness isn't dead. This house is for you, Elias, but the building of it, the act of building it, is healing us." Elias wept openly, reaching out and taking Patercris's heavy hand in his frail one. "Then build it, sons. Build it tall." 3 days later, the deafening noise of hammers finally stopped. Elias stood in the exact spot his old rotting porch used to be, but now his boots rested on solid, polished mahogany. Above him was a pristine, strong roof. The peeling paint was gone, replaced by flawless, gleaming white siding. Patercris walked up the new steps. He didn't have a bowl of food this time. He had a heavy brass key. "It's done," Patercris said, his voice dropping to a reverent whisper. The entire army of 200 bikers stood in the yard, completely silent, watching the exchange with bated breath. "It's too beautiful!" Elias cried, running his weathered hand along the sturdy new railing, his knees trembling. "I don't deserve this. I can never repay you." "Stop saying that," Patroclus commanded gently, his voice full of absolute love. He pressed the cold brass key into Elias's palm and folded the old man's fingers over it. "The pantry inside is fully stocked for a year. The roof is rated for a hurricane. The plumbing is brand new. We built a new barn out back for your tools." "But why?" Elias sobbed, looking at the sea of leather and denim in his yard. "Because you're family now, Elias," Patroclus said, stepping back and putting his hand over his heart. "You wear the 4-H pin. We wear the eagle, but under it all we bleed the same. We hurt the same, and now we heal the same. This is your home. You will never be cold, and you will never be hungry again. That is a blood promise from the veterans' riders." 6 months later. The true measure of the miracle didn't happen on the day the house was finished. It happened exactly 6 months later, proving this wasn't just a fleeting moment of charity. It was Thanksgiving morning. The air was biting cold. Thick white frost clinging to the pristine wooden fences the bikers had built around Elias's property. Elias was in his massive, newly built kitchen. He wasn't wearing his frayed straw hat today. He wore a clean-pressed button-down shirt under his new denim overalls. He was standing over a massive industrial-sized stove, a parting gift from the Hell's Angels, stirring a massive pot of chili that could feed an army. The distant low rumble of motorcycle engines started around 10 in the morning. Elias smiled, the deep wrinkles around his eyes crinkling with pure, unadulterated joy. He wiped his hands on a clean towel and walked out onto his sturdy, beautiful front porch. Down the road, 50 motorcycles were turning into his long dirt driveway. They weren't bringing lumber or tools this time. Patroclus parked his bike at the front, shutting off the deafening engine. He swung his leg over the seat, his leather jacket creaking in the freezing cold air. He looked exactly as tough as the day they first met, but the deep, haunted, heartbroken sadness in his eyes was entirely gone. It had been replaced by a bright, steady peace. He walked up the wooden steps, pulling off his heavy riding gloves. "Happy Thanksgiving, Elias!" Patroclus grinned broadly, pulling the elderly farmer into a massive, warm hug. "I told you boys I was serving the food at noon," Elias laughed loudly, patting the giant biker on the back with surprising strength. "You're 2 hours early." "The guys were getting hungry," Patroclus joked, looking back at the men dismounting their bikes in the yard. "And frankly, Elias, none of us had anywhere better to be today. Family belongs together on the holidays." Elias looked out at the 50 men. They were laughing, slapping each other on the back, and walking up the pathway towards his warm, glowing house. They weren't stranded anymore. They weren't broken. They weren't discarded by society. And looking at them, Elias realized he wasn't a lonely, dying old man anymore either. The void his wife had left behind was finally filled with the loud, chaotic love of 50 rough-looking sons. "Well," Elias said, his voice thick with overwhelming emotion, stepping aside to hold the heavy oak front door wide open. "The chili is hot, and there's more than enough for everyone. Welcome home, sons." Patroclus stopped at the threshold. He looked at the old man, then looked around the massive, beautiful hallway that stood exactly where a rotting, miserable shack used to be. "Thank you, old man," Patroclus whispered, his voice catching, "for everything." "No," Elias replied, a single happy tear sliding down his cheek as he clapped the biker on the shoulder. Thank you. Now get in here before the food gets cold.